Field workers in an almond orchard approximately 1 mile from Highway 99 discovered the body of a woman curled in a fetal position and immediately contacted the sheriff's office in Kern County. Responding deputies secured the area as homicide detectives arrived and began examining the scene with methodical precision. The victim appeared to be a young woman, estimated to be around 35 years old, and her facial features suggested she might have Native American ancestry. She was fully dressed in a pink top, blue jeans, and remarkably clean white sneakers. Yet the front of her blouse was completely saturated with blood, indicating a violent and deliberate attack. Detectives quickly determined that this was no accidental death. The number of stab wounds was extensive, surpassing anything some investigators had previously encountered. And the severity of the injuries made it clear the perpetrator had intended to kill. While surveying the surrounding ground, they observed tire tracks but found no additional footprints, reinforcing the theory that the woman had been murdered elsewhere and transported to the orchard. This evidence led authorities to classify the scene as a body dump location, where the victim had been placed after the fatal assault. Further investigation revealed the woman had no identification, no purse, no jewelry, and nothing to indicate her name or origin. With no immediate way to identify her, she was formally designated as an unidentified Jane Doe. The lack of personal effects created significant obstacles for investigators, as they had no clear starting point for tracing her movements prior to death or for locating potential witnesses. Every attempt to uncover her identity depended entirely on physical evidence and forensic examination. At the coroner's office, medical examiners determined that the victim showed signs of sexual assault. Swabs were taken from the body to collect semen as potential evidence, preserving material that might someday help identify a suspect. In addition to biological evidence, investigators focused on the few distinguishing characteristics she possessed. The most notable features were two visible tattoos that could possibly lead to recognition. One tattoo depicted a rose with the word mother above it and the phrase "I love you" below, suggesting emotional significance or a meaningful bond. The second tattoo was a heart containing the name Shirley, with the words "Love you" above and Seattle below. These markings became the primary visual identifiers for the victim and represented the only clues to her personal life and possible connections. Investigators documented these details carefully, knowing they might one day provide the key to restoring a name to the woman found abandoned in the orchard. Every recorded observation remained essential as detectives prioritized accuracy and preservation of facts. The careful cataloging of clothing, positioning, injuries, and unique markings formed the foundation of the investigation. Despite the absence of identity, officials remained focused on documenting the victim with dignity and professional responsibility throughout proceedings. Janitors at the Westlake High School parking lot discovered a partially disrobed young woman lying motionless after initially mistaking her body for a discarded mannequin. When they approached, they realized she was a victim of extreme violence and immediately contacted authorities. Responding officers secured the area while investigators began documenting the scene and the visible injuries. The victim had clear stab wounds to her upper body, and her shoes had been tossed onto the nearby hillside, suggesting a struggle before she was left at the location. Bloody drag marks across the pavement indicated she had been pulled from a vehicle and moved against her will, reinforcing the conclusion that the parking lot was not the primary crime scene. Investigators determined she had been transported by car and left where she was found, classifying the area as another body dump site. The manner in which the victim was positioned and the evidence of force pointed to a brutal and deliberate assault rather than an accidental death. Like the earlier victim in Kern County, this woman carried no identification, no personal documents, and no belongings that could establish her identity. Because no immediate information linked her to any known missing persons reports, she was officially designated a Jane Doe, and later referred to as Jane Doe Ventura. This lack of identification significantly hindered the investigation, leaving authorities with little information about her background or final movements. The autopsy provided further clarity regarding the severity of the crime. Medical examiners determined that she had been stabbed approximately 29 times, confirming the ferocity of the attack. Evidence of sexual assault was also documented, reinforcing patterns seen in the earlier case involving the Kern County Jane Doe. These findings strongly suggested that the two murders shared common characteristics. Investigators carefully compared both crime scenes, noting the striking similarities. Both women had suffered sexual assault, both had been stabbed repeatedly, and both had been left without identification in isolated dumping locations. The parallel nature of these details led detectives to believe the killings were connected, possibly committed by the same offender, operating with a consistent method. Despite these conclusions, the absence of confirmed identities for either victim created ongoing investigative frustration. Without knowing who the women were, detectives struggled to trace their movements, confirm last sightings, or identify meaningful personal connections. The lack of names reduced crucial investigative pathways, forcing reliance on forensic evidence and scene analysis alone. Every observed detail, from the placement of the body to the condition of the surrounding area, was preserved with careful documentation. Authorities maintained a methodical approach while continuing to seek answers, understanding that restoring identity to the victim remained essential for justice and accountability. They documented measure, angle, and trace with law enforcement faced immediate and persistent challenges during the early stages of both investigations because neither victim could be identified. Without names, personal histories, or confirmed last sightings, detectives had no clear direction for locating witnesses or retracing the victim's movements prior to their deaths. Every potential lead relied on physical evidence alone, severely limiting investigative avenues and placing an immense burden on officers attempting to pursue accountability and factual clarity. The absence of identification removed access to family connections, employment records, social circles, or to missing person references that typically guide an investigation. Detectives could not determine where the victims had been last seen, who they interacted with, or what circumstances might have placed them in danger. This lack of personal context forced investigators to operate under uncertainty, relying heavily on scene documentation and limited forensic resources available at the time. Physical evidence therefore became the primary investigative foundation. Tire tracks observed at the crime scenes provided some contextual clues, but without comparison points, their value remained restricted. Rape kit samples and autopsy findings were preserved carefully, documenting the injuries and evidence of sexual assault in both cases. These materials were stored for potential future analysis, though contemporaneous forensic technology offered limited capability to extract comprehensive identifying information or link suspects through DNA. The classification of both women as Jane Does introduced emotional and procedural complications. Investigators not only confronted technical obstacles, but also the psychological weight of pursuing justice for individuals who remained nameless. The absence of identity often delayed public engagement and weakened the ability to generate informative tips, contributing to stalled progress and mounting frustration within investigative teams. As years passed, the cases remained unresolved. Evidence rested in storage, preserved yet underutilized, constrained by the technological limitations of the late 1970s and early 1980s. DNA analysis was not advanced enough to produce meaningful connections or provide investigative breakthroughs during that period. The detectives could only maintain records and hope that future scientific developments might offer renewed possibilities. The uncertainty surrounding the victims' identities persisted, creating a lingering sense of incompletion for law enforcement and the broader community. Each unanswered question reinforced the reality that crucial elements of the cases were beyond immediate reach. Despite thorough documentation and procedural diligence, investigators were left with unresolved violent crimes and the ongoing challenge of restoring dignity and identity to two unknown women. Procedural delays continued as reports were reviewed repeatedly and physical materials remained cataloged within secured evidence facilities. Investigators documented every observation but could not move forward without technological support capable of extracting actionable information. This stagnation reinforced how anonymous victims often become forgotten within overwhelmed systems. The investigative atmosphere reflected discipline. In 2011, the Ventura Jane Doe case was formally reopened when investigator Steve Rhodes assumed responsibility after joining the cold case unit. His first priority involved re-examining evidence collected decades earlier, including rape kit samples and clothing fibers preserved from the original examination conducted in 1980. Using modern forensic techniques, This biological material was submitted to the combined DNA index system, allowing analysts to evaluate it with capabilities unavailable during the original investigation and initiate a comprehensive comparative process. The Department of Justice later reported a significant breakthrough when the submitted evidence produced a confirmed DNA match to a convicted felon named Wilson Schust, who was also referenced as Wilson West in certain records. This discovery marked the first concrete forensic link between the two murders and an identifiable suspect, renewing investigative momentum after years of stagnation. The match demonstrated that the suspect had been in sexual contact with the victim, validating the scientific value of preserved forensic evidence. Further analysis revealed that a prior entry within CODIS had already linked Schust to the Kern County Jane Doe case, confirming that both victims were connected through the same individual. This correlation allowed investigators to establish a unified narrative, demonstrating that the crimes were not isolated events, but components of a broader pattern reflecting consistent behavior and method. Evidence that had once remained dormant now provided measurable direction, highlighting the decisive role of forensic advancement in reactivating previously inactive cases. While the DNA match offered pivotal clarity, investigators acknowledged that confirmation of sexual contact alone did not establish direct responsibility for the homicides. Despite the seriousness of the evidence, procedural standards required further substantiation linking Schust to the act of murder beyond biological presence. This measured approach underscored the importance of maintaining investigative integrity and ensuring conclusions remained rooted in verifiable facts, supported by comprehensive documentation and corroborative analysis. The renewed investigation demonstrated how modern forensic methodologies transformed long-preserved evidence into actionable intelligence. Techniques unavailable during the original inquiry now enabled more precise identification and cross-reference opportunities, allowing law enforcement to reassess prior conclusions and develop focused strategies guided by scientific reliability. Each procedural step reinforced the evolving relationship between investigative persistence and technological progression. What had once been limited by technological constraints was now informed by precise analytical capacity, redefining how decades-old evidence could be interpreted within contemporary investigative frameworks. The integration of CODIS into this process became the critical mechanism that bridged historical ambiguity with renewed possibility, transforming static case materials into compelling investigative direction. Through disciplined evaluation and methodical application, authorities transitioned from uncertainty towards structured accountability, reaffirming their commitment to uncovering truth while acknowledging that scientific evidence must be complemented by additional verification before final conclusions could be responsibly. Wilson Schust was born and raised in Louisiana before eventually relocating to California, where his documented history began reflecting a pattern of escalating criminal behavior. He entered the United States Army but was later discharged due to drug abuse, an event that preceded his move to Los Angeles and the continuation of his unlawful conduct. Investigative records consistently show that his actions followed a trajectory marked by repeated sexual violence and disregard for human life. In 1977, Schust was arrested for the kidnapping and rape of a young woman whom he left for dead. This incident resulted in a conviction and a sentence of 2 years in state prison, formally identifying him as a dangerous offender within law enforcement databases. The offense established an early pattern of predatory behavior that would later become central to renewed investigative scrutiny. Schust was paroled in June 1980 and subsequently relocated to Kings County, placing him geographically near the areas where the Jane Doe murders later occurred. He remained free for approximately 3 months before the violent deaths of the unidentified victims were discovered. Investigators noted that his confirmed presence in the region during the timeline of the crime significantly reinforced suspicions regarding his potential involvement, though procedural caution remained essential. DNA evidence collected from both Jane Doe victims later confirmed that Schust had sexual contact with each woman. This forensic finding established a direct biological connection, yet investigators emphasized that sexual contact alone could not conclusively determine responsibility for homicide. Their approach maintained a measured reliance on verifiable data while acknowledging the complexity associated with linking presence to lethal intent. The alignment between Schust's known criminal history and the nature of the Jane Doe cases presented a consistent narrative of serial sexual violence. His past conduct, including rape, kidnapping, and abandonment of a victim, closely mirrored the circumstances surrounding both unidentified women. Law enforcement professionals carefully assessed his historical timeline, recognizing that his behavior followed a repetitive and alarming pattern indicative of predatory methodology. Throughout the investigative process, authorities documented Schust's movements, background, and criminal record with precision and neutrality. Every detail was examined to establish factual coherence without exceeding evidentiary limitations. This disciplined approach underscored the importance of procedural responsibility while constructing a profile rooted entirely in confirmed records and observed behavioral patterns. His documented trajectory emphasized continuity between past offenses and current suspicions, reinforcing the investigative importance of historical analysis in understanding present violent crimes. Each confirmed action formed a chronological narrative that directly aligned with the manner in which both Jane Does were assaulted and murdered, solidifying his characterization as a subject of focused and sustained investigation. Further evidence surfaced through connections identified during a 2008 interview in which Wilson Schust referenced staying with a family named the Bells. Investigator Steve Rhodes revisited this detail and began working to locate the family, recognizing its potential importance within the broader investigation. Through diligent research and coordination, he traced their location to Oklahoma and contacted local law enforcement to assist in arranging interviews and verifying details. With police support, Rhodes initiated contact with Mrs. Bell and her son Scott, seeking clarification surrounding Schust's time in their household. Their recollections proved significant. Scott stated that Schust had once admitted to picking up a woman at a bar, driving her into the countryside, and killing her. This account directly aligned with established details of the Kern County Jane Doe case and added testimonial weight to existing forensic evidence. The information provided by the Bell family became a critical component of the investigative record. Scott's statement was treated with procedural seriousness as it reflected a verbal acknowledgement of violent conduct consistent with known crime scene details. This disclosure offered corroboration to the previously obtained DNA evidence, linking Schust to both victims, strengthening the foundation of the developing legal case. Rhodes recognized the importance of incorporating this testimony into the larger narrative. The admission referenced specific behavior patterns and matched geographical implications previously identified by investigators. This development reduced ambiguity and reinforced the relevance of Schust as a central figure within the case, while maintaining adherence to evidentiary standards. Each interview was conducted carefully, ensuring all statements were recorded accurately and preserved within official documentation. The cooperative effort between agencies represented a methodical pursuit of clarity, informed by persistence and attention to overlooked historical details. The revisiting of a decades-old lead demonstrated how investigative dedication could revive critical information long after initial inquiries had ceased. By pursuing the Bell family connection, Rhodes bridged a gap between dormant evidence and actionable testimony. This progression illustrated how consistent effort, supported by interdepartmental collaboration, could yield significant insight. The discovery underscored the importance of reviewing prior interviews and reassessing minor details that had previously been overlooked or considered inconsequential. Ultimately, the Bell family testimony expanded the investigative perspective, transforming fragmented information into supportive narrative structure. The combined strength of forensic findings and testimonial evidence reinforced the case against Schust. Through strategic follow-up and deliberate questioning, investigators secured an essential piece that contributed directly to restoring clarity after years of uncertainty and limited progress. This renewed testimony provided added structure to the investigative narrative and allowed authorities to present a more comprehensive account of Schust's actions and history. Legal proceedings moved forward following the accumulation of forensic and testimonial evidence gathered by investigators. Wilson Schust entered a formal plea of not guilty, maintaining his position despite the comprehensive material presented against him. The case progressed through the judicial system with careful evaluation of DNA findings, witness statements, and documented investigative outcomes. In July 2018, 38 years after the murders of the two unidentified women, the court delivered its final verdict. Schust was found guilty of killing both Jane Doe victims, bringing a formal conclusion to one of the longest unresolved investigations connected to the crimes. The verdict reflected the combined strength of forensic science and persistent investigative work that transformed dormant evidence into legally recognized proof. The sentencing phase followed, and the court imposed 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. This decision ensured that Schust would remain incarcerated for the remainder of his natural life, formally acknowledging the severity of the offenses and the irreversible harm inflicted upon the victims. The sentencing marked a definitive closure to decades of uncertainty within the judicial process. For law enforcement, the conviction represented a significant milestone. It confirmed that long-standing cold cases could still reach resolution when supported by methodical investigation and technological advancement. Detectives who had invested years pursuing clarity viewed the outcome as validation of disciplined procedure and sustained commitment to justice. The broader implications of this verdict extended beyond the immediate case. It demonstrated the potential of modern forensic techniques to revive cases previously constrained by outdated technology. Investigators recognized that the successful prosecution illustrated how preserved evidence, when properly reanalyzed, can achieve accountability even after substantial time has passed. This ruling reinforced the principle that violent crimes, regardless of age, remain subject to legal consequence. The judicial outcome underscored the importance of persistence, accuracy, and adherence to due process throughout the investigative life cycle. Each procedural decision contributed to a fair and transparent resolution grounded in verified evidence. The final judgment served as a reminder that justice, though delayed, can still be achieved through structured legal processes. It provided acknowledgement to the victims and affirmed the dedication of professionals committed to uncovering truth. For the investigative community, the case stood as a clear example of how cold cases can evolve into successful prosecutions when guided by careful analysis, cooperation, and unwavering attention to factual integrity within judicial frameworks. This verdict reinforced confidence among investigative agencies that continued vigilance and record preservation remain essential for achieving accountability in complex violent crime cases. It underscored the necessity of collaborative efforts between forensic specialists. Investigators pursued the identification of the Kern County Jane Doe through coordinated efforts involving the Jane Doe Project and renewed engagement with the victim's potential family network. A relative attending a public gathering spoke about an aunt named Shirley who had been missing for many years, prompting others to direct her toward online resources displaying images and descriptions of unidentified victims. Through social media, she encountered photographs and detailed tattoo descriptions that immediately aligned with her memory of Shirley, creating a profound moment of recognition grounded in visual and personal familiarity. The Jane Doe Project facilitated further steps by requesting that the relatives submit a DNA sample to establish biological confirmation. This process followed established forensic protocols and ensured accuracy while preserving the integrity of the investigative findings. Upon completion of the analysis, results confirmed that the Kern County Jane Doe was indeed Shirley, formally restoring her identity after decades of uncertainty and anonymity. This determination transitioned the case from unresolved mystery to acknowledged truth. The emotional impact on Shirley's family member was immediate and overwhelming. She expressed a mixture of grief, relief, and disbelief as years of unanswered questions were finally replaced with confirmed resolution. The confirmation process validated her initial recognition and transformed memories into certainty. For the family, the identification represented closure and offered an end to prolonged searching and unanswered concern. Investigators documented the confirmation with care, recognizing that the restoration of identity held profound significance beyond procedural success. Shirley was no longer an unknown victim, but a named individual whose disappearance had left a lasting void within her family. The process served as a reminder of the importance of persistence, collaboration, and sensitivity when addressing cases involving unidentified victims. This resolution offered meaningful closure for those who had spent decades wondering about Shirley's whereabouts. It also demonstrated how modern investigative techniques, combined with public participation and familial courage, could restore dignity to individuals whose identities were lost to time. Through coordinated forensic assessment and emotional resilience, the truth emerged and provided a long-awaited answer to those who had held memories of Shirley with enduring loyalty and hope. The identification process also reaffirmed the careful relationship between technology and human recognition. While DNA delivered the definitive confirmation, the initial acknowledgement by a family member ensured that the investigative effort remained deeply connected to lived experience. Authorities treated the moment with professionalism and compassion, understanding its significance for those involved. The restored name provided rightful acknowledgement and allowed the case record to reflect historical truth with accuracy. For Shirley's relatives, the knowledge answered the long-standing question of what happened and where she had gone. The closure allowed them to grieve with clarity and finally honor her memory with certainty and peace. Investigators continue focused efforts to identify the Ventura County Jane Doe, prioritizing restoration of her name and personal history through disciplined forensic methodology. DNA tracing conducted through established analysis has linked her ancestry to Guatemala and New Mexico, providing the first measurable insight into her potential familial origins. These findings redirected investigative strategy toward exploring regional connections and evaluating possible migratory patterns that could support renewed identification efforts aligned with verifiable data. The DNA results also suggested potential ties to the Los Angeles area, offering investigators a broader geographic framework for continued research. This information remains crucial as authorities attempt to connect genetic data with missing person records and previously unexamined family line references. Each development contributes incremental progress toward resolving the identity of the woman previously known only as Jane Doe Ventura. Investigators have consistently emphasized the importance of dignity in this process, recognizing that the absence of identity represents not only a procedural challenge, but a profound human loss. Returning her name remains a central objective, guided by sensitivity, precision, and unwavering attention to evidentiary accuracy. Every step undertaken reinforces the principle that unidentified victims deserve recognition, humanity, and compassionate remembrance. The ongoing work involves careful coordination with genealogical specialists and forensic analysts who meticulously interpret available data. This collaborative approach reflects the evolving integration of science and investigative perseverance, supporting the goal of connecting biological evidence to living relatives who may still be searching for answers. Such efforts remain conducted within defined ethical standards and verified procedural guidelines. Investigators maintain consistent communication and documentation, ensuring that each new connection is treated with structured evaluation. They approach the task with patience, understanding that identification requires time, repeated validation, and continual reassessment of emerging details. The process remains deliberate and controlled, reinforcing the seriousness of restoring identity to an unnamed victim. Through these sustained initiatives, authorities continue honoring the responsibility to provide closure to families who may have lost a loved one without resolution. The possibility of returning a name to the Ventura County Jane Doe symbolizes the effort to correct historical silence and replace anonymity with acknowledgement and respect. Each investigative action strengthens the foundation for possible recognition and eventual confirmation. As progress continues, investigators remain focused on the mission of affirming her identity through consistent factual alignment. Their commitment reflects dedication to justice, remembrance, and the belief that every victim deserves acknowledgement regardless of time or circumstance. The pursuit demonstrates continued resolve to ensure the woman is no longer remembered solely as Jane Doe, but as an individual granted restored recognition and rightful place within personal and investigative history, reinforcing values of compassion, precision, and investigators reaffirm their pledge to seek justice for every victim connected to the case, emphasizing accountability as a foundational responsibility. The lasting impact of this investigation demonstrated how dedication, disciplined procedure, and unwavering persistence can bring resolution to crimes long considered beyond clarity. Each resolved element reinforced the belief that time does not diminish the obligation to pursue truth through lawful and ethical channels. This case highlighted the critical role of forensic science in transforming uncertainty into confirmed understanding. Modern analytical techniques allowed evidence once dormant to become meaningful, supporting accurate conclusions and structured legal outcomes. Across every stage, persistence remained essential, guiding investigators through years of complexity while maintaining respect for each unnamed victim. The commitment to restoring identity extended beyond procedural necessity and into collective responsibility. Law enforcement recognized that every victim deserved acknowledgement, dignity, and formal recognition as an individual rather than a statistic. Through sustained effort, professionals affirm that restoring identity restores humanity and affirms the value of memory, truth, and justice. Community collaboration emerged as an equally significant component of this enduring mission. Contributions from families, public awareness, and investigative coordination strengthened the foundation for progress. These partnerships reflected an integrated approach where collective vigilance and cooperation reinforced the structure of accountability and transparency. The case underscored the importance of maintaining detailed records, preserving evidence, and supporting continual review. It demonstrated that methodical dedication combined with scientific advancement can reconnect fragmented histories and provide long-awaited resolution. This process provided reassurance that unresolved crimes are not abandoned, but instead remain active responsibilities within the justice system. Investigators reiterated that their work extends beyond individual cases and forms part of a broader commitment to protect communities through diligent pursuit of truth. Their pledge represented continuity, consistency, and ethical responsibility, conveying that every victim matters within the investigative landscape. Through every procedural decision and forensic advancement, the narrative affirmed the principle that justice requires patience and persistence. The careful restoration of identity and accountability for past violence created a lasting legacy that reinforces professional integrity and community trust. This conclusion serves as a statement of ongoing dedication, recognizing that healing and resolution remain essential components of justice. It reinforces faith in methodical perseverance, collaborative effort, and the unwavering resolve to honor victims through truth, recognition, and disciplined investigative excellence. These principles continue guiding future cold case initiatives, reinforcing standards of accuracy and compassion within investigative frameworks. By honoring promises made to victims and